Our chronological Bible study for September 23rd is Esther, chapters 1 through 5. We know this story quite well. We've heard it. We have probably seen movies and we're learning about it in Sunday school, many of us. And there's a danger that becomes associated with that. When you know a story well, it tends to lose its power. You become inoculated to the life lessons. And so you might even be tempted to skip over it or speed read through it and not really glean anything from it. As we are reading today, let's slow down. Let's look at every word. Let's look at the definitions. What does the name Esther mean? Well, it means star. Stars a lot of times represent the children of God, shining like bright lights in a dark sky. The name Hadassah means myrtle, as in a myrtle tree. It's an evergreen. It's known for its rich green, glossy leaves, and it's a sign of life growing in arid places. This Queen Hadassah was strong and resilient, as her name implied, and she was appointed for such a time as this. There's a temptation within all of us to rush to the happy ending, but to really understand the power of the story, we need to get intimately involved with the details that led to this woman growing up in a foreign land, exiled from her family's heritage as an orphan. This story is set for us during the reign of Ahasuerus, which is Artaxerxes I of the Persian Empire. He came to the throne in the year 486 BC, exactly 100 years after the temple was desecrated in Nebuchadnezzar's final raid against Jerusalem. All of the Jews of stature were either killed or taken captive to Babylon. As we know, Babylon later fell to the Medo-Persian Empire. The Persians outlasted the Medes, and now here we are 100 years later, and many of the Jewish people never went back to Israel. It was difficult there. The people were meeting opposition. Some of them were staying behind, and many of them were in different places. They were spread throughout the land. Ahasuerus as king is the same king that was being written letters to in Ezra chapter 4, and he was issuing decrees to cease the work on the temple. It was a turbulent time to be a Jew. This young lady, as beautiful as she was an orphan. She had lost her parents, perhaps to persecution of Jewish people. She was in a foreign land, being raised by her uncle who loved her very much. And then perhaps out of desperation, perhaps out of a desire to make sure she was cared for and lacking provision for himself with no certainty of the future, he enrolls her in this beauty pageant, which is essentially going to add her to the king's harem. There's no guarantee she will become queen. There's no guarantee that she will ever have a say or that he will ever even see her again. There is just a prayer and a hope that God is in it and that God will use it, despite this being the only book in the entire Bible that never mentions God once. I would think that Esther in this situation likely felt as though God had forgotten her, that she was still reaping the reward of the sin of her grandparents. Likely Mordecai would have been tempted to feel the same way. He had nothing but his niece. He was being persecuted for his ethnicity and his faith. He became aware of a plot to assassinate the king. He did something about it at risk to his own person. He reported it to the king, and it turns out this plot he made the king aware of was actually true. He saved the king's life, but he was never rewarded for it. And then after all of that, he becomes aware of a wicked and sinister plot to destroy him and all of their people. It wasn't enough for Haman to be the king's servant, to be his favorite steward. It wasn't enough for him to be given the king's ring, for him to be wealthy and have 10 sons. There's never enough material wealth and glory for the wicked. Why do the nations rage and the peoples plot in vain? Fortunately, though, God was at work. Chapter 3 says, The decree to commit genocide against the Hebrew people threw everyone into confusion. That's what the enemy does. But confusion is not from God. And God raised up Esther to speak her voice so that God's will would go forth. It took an immense amount of courage and resolve for Esther to do that. And right now, in 2025, we are seeing a people stand up with a courageous voice compelled by conviction, saying this genocide that has been taking place is wrong. And just like in the days of Esther, it had to get very dark before the light broke forth. The same is happening now in America and in the world in 2025. But it's always darkest before the dawn. And at the end of the day, God always wins. May He bless you as you consider these things, as you read and meditate on His Word today. See you tomorrow.